Right. Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's Magnus Nielsen again, Lord Londonstone, right in the heart of London. And what I've done today is I'm coming down here to sort of wind up this section of the story about the development of Parliament and the British government and the British Constitution towards the end of the reign of King James II, which took place in the 1680s. He proved to be a very unpopular king, and there were powerful people in the country who went to seek help from William, who was effectively the King of Holland. He wasn't called by that title, he was called the Stadtholder. And what they did quite literally was invite him to invade England. So he did that, and he arrived in a place called Tor Bay on the 5th of November, 1688. And then with a small army which he gathered, many supporters, he advanced towards London. And when King James learnt of this, he eventually ignominiously fled, throwing his seal into the River Thames. He made for France because King Louis XIV of France was his cousin. So this is the banqueting house, ladies and gentlemen, and I've mentioned this place before. And it was the scene originally of the beheading of King Charles I in 1649. Anyway, William came to London, and he married a lady called Mary, who was the Protestant daughter of King James II. And they were both proclaimed King and Queen of England in this very building, in January of 1889. King William had problems with his asthma. He couldn't really cope with living so close to the River Thames. So what he did was he moved out of here, and he found new accommodation for himself in what building which we now call Kensington Palace. So that's how Kensington Palace came to be a royal home. So this place was, I won't say abandoned, you still had governmental functions taking place. This is where all the king's servants used to live still, and that's why we have the civil service still located in Whitehall. So what I'm just doing, ladies and gentlemen, I am waiting for the light. They've changed, fantastic. So we'll cross over. So you had a joint monarchy in William and Mary. Now normally it's not possible for a man to become King of England just simply by marrying the Queen Regnant, but special provision was made for William. And so we talk about the reigns of King William and Mary. Actually, Mary died in 1694. She caught smallpox, rather sadly, and William, I beg your pardon, William only survived until 1702. But anyway, what I'm now doing is I'm walking down Whitehall. I'm on the east side of Whitehall, walking down towards Parliament Square. We've been to Parliament Square before, and I came up here, if you recall, in some earlier videos. But my reason for coming down here, as I said, we then had, after William and Mary, the reign of Queen Anne, who was the sister of Queen Mary, and she was the last of the Stuart monarchs, and she reigned from 1702 to 1714. The great significant events of her reign were the union of the kingdoms of England and Scotland into the United Kingdom of Great Britain. Ireland was a kingdom that was actually ruled by the King or Queen of England, but it was separate until 1801, when it all became part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Talk more about that later on. But what I'm doing is making my way down Whitehall. The other thing about Queen Anne interesting is that she was the very last English monarch ever to refuse to give her assent to a bill that had been passed both by the House of Lords and the House of Commons. No king or queen has ever done that since. What I'm now doing as I'm making my way down Whitehall and looking across the way, I'm looking at Downing Street. Now, with the death of Queen Anne, the question is who was then going to be the next monarch of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. And they found someone who turned out to be King George of Hanover. Hanover at that time was one of the many kingdoms that formed part of the Holy Roman Empire, which stretched over what is most of modern Germany. And he was in line. In fact, there were others before him, but the great advantage was that he was a Protestant and not a Catholic. So that's how he became the king. Now, he became king and he came over to England to reign. One big problem, this would have been in 1714, his big problem was that he didn't speak English. So what had to happen was that he really couldn't undertake all the duties of the king, and eventually he had to outsource these or offload them to a man called Robert Walpole, who became effectively the Prime Minister. It was Walpole rather than the king who chaired the meetings of the committee, the cabinet, which was really the governing body of the country. And Walpole was given a special house by the king, not as the Prime Minister, but as the First Lord of the Treasury. In fact, it wasn't known. In fact, Prime Ministers weren't given that title until really the 20th century. He was known as the First Lord of the Treasury. And across the way you can see Downing Street, which is sort of sheltered and protected from the public by these high railings. We've got an ambulance which is shrieking its head off. That's just what living in London is all about these days. You can see people who are now gathering on the streets. Anyway, come back to Walpole and Downing Street. Now, Downing Street was named after a man called George Downing. After the Palace of Whitehall burnt down in 1698, he got hold of a piece of property here and improved it, and he called it Downing Street. So there are a number of houses, and this was all let out to rent. So that's how Downing Street gets its name, from George Downing, who was quite a scoundrel, really. He'd worked for Oliver Cromwell as part of his espionage network, and then when the King Charles II came back to the throne, he transferred his allegiance and started betraying all his former colleagues to the king. So he was not a very pleasant person to work with, but he made a lot of money, presumably from his property interest in Downing Street, and he endowed Downing College, one of the colleges of Cambridge University. So that's how we have Prime Ministers, and that's why the Prime Minister lives at number 10 Downing Street. At the present moment, that is a man called Sir Keir Starmer. And as I'm making this video on the 4th of September, I have to say quite honestly that Sir Keir Starmer is not the most popular man in the country, but then not always the Prime Minister who is the most popular person. But what I'm doing now is just heading down towards Parliament Square, and you can see again the cenotaph, which is outside the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Next to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office you have the Treasury. Now, these buildings went up in the late Victorian period to accommodate the reformed civil service. There were reforms made to the civil service in the 1850s and 60s, and these buildings went up shortly afterwards. They've become, of course, very important. The Foreign Office is the place which really controls all our foreign relations with different countries. And the old Treasury building, actually they've moved out from the Treasury now, there's another department in there, but they looked after the financial situation of the country. Now, Prime Ministers, the reason why you choose a Prime Minister is Walpole was the only person who could converse with George I. They spoke in French. But anyway, the Prime Minister eventually took over all the runnings of all the King's duties with regard to the government. And he was the man who had the confidence of Parliament, House of Lords and House of Commons. And technically a king, even King Charles III, could choose anyone to be his Prime Minister. He might choose me, although I'm very unlikely to become a Prime Minister just by making videos or doing anything else. But he will choose the person who has the confidence of the House of Parliament, and specifically the House of Commons. So the king, the Prime Minister is the man who is elected rather than the Chief Minister, like Wolsey, who is somebody who is specially appointed by the King. The Prime Minister you can really think of as being the man who is elected, could be a member of the House of Lords. We used to have members of the House of Lords as Prime Minister at one time, particularly throughout the 18th century and even into the 19th. But it was thought afterwards in the 20th century that that was archaic and that much rather have somebody from the House of Commons. So really ever since the resignation of Lord Salisbury in the early 1900s, all the Prime Ministers have come from the House of Commons. Now I'm sure you recognise this, ladies and gentlemen. As I say, this is the Treasury building, or the old, I should say the old Treasury building, because the Treasury is no longer based there, or at least only in part of it. And I'm making my way down from here towards Parliament Square and towards the modern buildings of the Houses of Parliament. So I'll do that. Just make along there, you can see Westminster Abbey from the side. Sometimes you see little demonstrations here on one topic or another, which is only natural, because this is, if you've got something you're upset about, this is certainly the place to come and demonstrate. But here, it's beginning to rain, which is rather annoying. I wasn't expecting this. It's been changing all day. It's September the 4th, Thursday the 4th of September. Right, here we are. The Houses of Parliament with the clock tower, ladies and gentlemen. The clock tower that was put up here, and it's the clock tower which holds the bell called Big Ben, right in the very top of that pointed roof. So what I propose to do is just sign off for the time being, but I will come back and I will talk about the Houses of Parliament, the new Houses of Parliament, which the building which you currently see. But I'll do that in another video because it will require another video. So I shall say over and out by now. Please leave comments. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Let me know how these videos, what you think about them, whether you think positively or negatively. I would like to hear either negative or positive comments, so that I can only improve what I'm setting out to do, because I still regard myself very much as learning. But anyway, that's Westminster Abbey, and you can see for yourself the House of Parliament and the iconic clock tower, which we now call the Elizabeth Tower, on the House of Parliament. And I shall just say over and out for the time being, and see you soon.